Another draft physics video presentation. Kind of redundant, but necessary, I think. It's a conversation. It's going to have to happen over and over again, I guess. This is going to be one of those elemental subjects. I mean, first we have gravity. We have a rational description of gravity. We have a rational description of the two-slit experiment, what a photon is. And then this is just so overtly crazy physics. So, I guess we'll draw some first, and just as context. Yeah, should have worked. Anyway, so there's just, this is a pretty simple history. Newton comes up with this simple understanding that mass times the velocity equals something. Okay, it equals a number. And the number can be converted into newtons per something, or joules, or anything you want to. All right, doesn't matter. You can convert it into any kind of unit of energy, and you could know that you could tell how fast a log is rolling, and you could figure out this amount, and you could figure out anything, and you could just easily convert it into a number. Okay, and so this is really the first energy equation. E equals m times v. Simple enough. Now, I would assert that that always works. It never fails to get the proportionally correct number, the horsepower, let's say. So it's just called horsepower. And you just multiply these numbers, it tells you how many horsepower. And it always works. And it never fails to work. No matter what you're testing, no matter how big it is, no matter how small it is, doesn't matter. If you can know its mass and its velocity, you can know exactly how many units of energy it possesses, how much it can transfer to something else. Always works, never fails, no example of it ever failing. No good example, let's just say. I mean, you can do some silly experiments and make something up. You can say, like, I can sit here and watch something, or the bullet example is a good example, right? I can hand you a bowling ball, okay? Or I can shoot a bullet through your head at 10,000 miles an hour. Now, obviously, the 10,000 hour bullet is going to dramatically look like it's more energy. Everybody, like if a bunch of ignorant people are sitting in the audience and you go, "What do you think, audience? Which one has more energy?" Yeah, they'll be idiots. And they'll say, "Oh, the bullet does. The bullet does." But no, it's actually the same amount of horsepower, the same amount of watts, the same amount of energy is being transferred. Just a little push of a bowling ball. All I have to do is just push it to you, and you have to catch it. That amount of energy is the same energy that blows somebody's brains out. Just a fact, okay? I mean, it's not exactly a fact, but it's really close to a fact. All right. And so then you use this. The physicist in the very expensive NOVA presentation of Einstein's history, where they put the little physicists in there, and the physicist talks about a car going twice its speed or 3 times its speed, and how it's 9 times more energy. It's absolutely nonsense. All right. So if we really did the test, I mean, I'm thinking maybe we have to pay for it, right? So it's like I'll put up the $1,700 as wager money. And then I'll have all you people who want to defend this nonsense, you can bet against me. Okay, we'll actually do the experiment. And since I'm the dissident, I should get maybe 2-to-1 odds. Okay, so for every dollar you bet, you only get 50% from me. So then I can have $3,000 worth of wagers. And we'll take 2 cars. We'll have one go 30 miles an hour. Okay, and then turn the motor off at a certain line in the road, and then go up a hill. And then we'll have one says 130 miles an hour. And then we'll have one go 15 miles an hour. That's doable here, the streets. I won't get arrested. Have the 15 mile an hour car go up the same hill. So we know this one has twice as much energy by Newton's laws. This one right here, twice as much. No more than twice as much, just twice as much. Okay? Miles per hour times mass, miles per hour times mass. Mass is the same car. Okay, so the number for this car, the E number, will be twice as much as that car. And there's nothing else to expect. Now, what they're saying is going to happen is this car okay, is going to go 4 times as far up this hill. 4 times. That's their theory. Okay? Now, do you think that's realistically going to happen? Or do you think it's going to be exactly what Newton said? Okay, the 15-mile-an-hour car will go this far, no farther. See, gravity's doing the testing. Gravity's doing the measuring. Gravity's a really good spring, because gravity always applies just the right amount of force per, pound. Just always the same. So if you're a heavy thing, it applies more force. If you're a light thing, it applies less force. It's just totally fair as fuck. So it's a really good measuring tool. And so it'll tell you the truth. You won't be able to defeat gravity with your viva voo voo voo, your living force, they call this kinetic energy. This is what's so obnoxious, is they've taken a word that's supposed to mean something. Kinetic just meant that your momentum is active. You have active momentum. And then potential energy was really when, okay, your momentum isn't right there now, okay, because you're being held by little fingers and you're being held up, but there's gravity coming down, and so you will have momentum as soon as I let go of you. And we call that potential energy. Because it's real momentum. You will have it in the future. Yeah, you don't have it right now, so it's potential. Okay, so that was a rational way of understanding things, but this is not rational. To call this fake 4 times energy rational, this isn't rational. It's completely irrational. So I can beg people to give me a link to a single video where they actually show this 4 times energy being captured. Okay, and don't be fooled. It's not false energy. They'll sit there and do an equation. Okay, they'll take this equation. Now let's understand that the equation started, okay, with Leibniz, the guy who was in great controversy with Newton. Okay, Newton accused him of actually stealing calculus. So they didn't like each other at all. And this is just a footnote on Leibniz's page. I'll show you his Wikipedia page. It's a footnote on his page. But this is the formula he was suggesting. mv squared. And he called it the living force because it doesn't make any sense. And you can't, why would anyone even do this? Why would anybody think this is the true answer of energy? Because you can only do this with a bizarre experiment. Most things will show you Newton all over the place. So why would you believe this? You'd only believe this if we were doing like superstition about, like bullets. You'd only do this if you thought, wow, that seems like so much more energy. So it's almost like if you're a seems-like physicist, you might do this. But let's understand, for 100 years, they couldn't even figure out that this was 100% wrong. Okay? And they hadn't put a half in front of it yet. So it was way overdone. So instead of having 100 energy units, this theory said you had 300 energy units. And then when they put the half in there, at least they knocked it down to 150, energy units. But still the wrong answer. Way wrong. Way wrong. Way off. And they pretend this isn't controversial, that somehow Newton's theory, so this theory, okay, and this explicit statement by Newton, they're saying this theory, 1/2 mv squared, these two things are equal and compatible. Even though you're completely different numbers. No, it's okay. It's fine. They're compatible. No problem. And in one page they'll tell you, well, energy is always conserved. And the next page will say kinetic energy doesn't have to be conserved. And they'll say it goes away as heat. But if it goes away as heat, then momentum can't be conserved. It's just such a garbage. So I'm just saying, what are we, how are we going to resolve this? This is just awful physics. It's sitting right there all over the place. This stupid equation is all over the place. Okay? And it was invented in an insanely sloppy manner. So first Leibniz just suggested, mv squared. He just does this part. And then a couple other wacky intellectuals start playing with it, and they say, so they found an experiment that made it look like this was true. So they dropped lead balls into clay, and because clay, okay, is one of those things where, the faster you hit it, the more the clay is affected. So you can, the faster you go, the further you can go into clay. And we're sort of the same way. I mean, you've probably experienced that kind of thing, right? Where if something hits you fast, it does so much more damage. This is like that kung fu stuff, right? Whatever his name was. Mickey Chin. What was the guy's name? Bruce Lee, right? And he would do all this like, real quick kind of stuff. Yeah, same amount of energy. It's just, yeah, if you can deliver the energy quickly, you can break somebody's eye socket. But if it's slow, you can't. Yeah, it's like breaking cement, that kind of thing. So it's just about how the energy is delivered. It doesn't have anything to do with how much actual energy you're delivering. So it can look like more energy because the cement block cracks and it breaks, but it's absolutely the same amount of energy. There's no difference in the amount of energy. It just happens that some materials are more vulnerable, and so their speed, they change. Unlike gravity going up this hill, gravity doesn't change. It can't change based on how fast it's going. Gravity's quick, so you can't fool gravity by going fast. But some materials, you can fool them by going fast, and so you can get a misimpression. Now, clearly, this argument is really about Leibniz and Newton, and clearly everybody should know that Newton was a diligent scientist. This Leibniz guy was he was just a paid, I don't know what you even call it, game player. He was paid by a bunch of rich people to go do subversive things in other countries, and do all kinds of other bullshit. So, and he was guilty of a whole bunch of shenanigans in his life with, erasing, he was a lawyer, just erase the time on a document and change it, and all kinds of crap like that. So he was up to shenanigans. So here you have one of the most diligent, careful physicists in the history of science, challenged by, kind of a dipshit. I mean, not a dumb guy at all, very smart, but kind of a dipshit. Right? And, it's just, and clearly here you have a formula that always works. With any great or good or careful experiment, this always works. It always gives you the right answer. What do we need this crap for? What do we need this living force squarey thing for? It's absolutely useless. And then again, it kind of in a way, when they put the half in it, they made it even worse, because now it's basically saying velocity is squared and mass is half. Half the mass, twice the velocity. It's almost worse. So, so I'm just saying, I mean, the controversy should be over, because I should just say, well, go ahead, show me an experiment where they got that 4 times the energy out. Show me an experiment where they did a car crash and they measured the energy of all the pieces that flew off, and they found that there was 9 times more energy, or any of that crackpot nonsense. They won't be able to show you the experiment. That's the key thing, right? And the only thing you're going to be able to do is drop a lead ball in the clay. Because apparently that's the only experiment really works. Or else you can shoot stuff off of a cliff, so to speak. You can shoot things off, a little tray. You could shoot a ball into the air and see how far it goes. But you can all kind of figure out that's not going to be measuring its actual energy again. That's just going to be measuring how light is it. Yeah, the light things will go further, and the heavy things won't. The light things going fast will obviously go further than the heavy things, but the heavy things will hit the ground with a lot more momentum, because gravity will work on them. They'll be adding more energy as they fall. When the heavy thing falls, it's gaining a lot more energy than the light thing. Feather and cannonball. Yeah, they fall at the same rate, but every second it's falling, the cannonball is collecting thousands of joules of energy, while the feather's collecting 3. So, but this is kind of fundamental. Like I said, they actually call this a real kind of, they use the word kinetic. They say this is kinetic energy. It's not real energy. It doesn't exist in the real universe. You could never transfer it. You could never collect it. So I thought of another experiment. If you have any idea, I mean, I'm just soliciting to see what people are willing to do, what they're willing to wager on. Because another experiment we can do is we just make a device, okay, with a adjustable weight on it, and just put a little generator on its wheel, okay, and then do the same experiment, where we could just push it at certain set speeds, and we just push one of them twice as fast as we push the other one, and then see how much the generator, how much energy it generates, okay, before it stops. And that'll be a pretty good measure. It's not as good as gravity, but it'll be a pretty good measure as long as we make big enough wheels, and so we can get as much the same traction and the same amount of the one that's going faster will travel faster before it stops, but they're both going to they'll end up creating, if they're the same weight, and we'd have different speeds, or we can do the same speed and different weights or whatever. But the fact is you're not going to be able to create this 4x. You're never going to create this v squared energy, because this v squared energy was never real. It was called the living force. It was always a religious notion. The Leibniz guy was a religious kook. I mean, so was Newton, so were all of them. But this is just made up. This is a fairy tale. This is a gremlin. This is a pixie. This is Tinkerbell. This is, this isn't even like SpongeBob is realer than this is. I mean, really, SpongeBob is realer than this energy is. And it's really crazy that none of you people care that this useless mush is in physics, this nonsense, this fake energy, and that they're using a real clinical word like kinetic, calling it kinetic energy like it's real, when it's just completely made up. It's a complete fictitious story. There's absolutely no good science pointing it to it being the truth. No good science at all. I can only reason with you people. It's my only weapon. That's all there is. Reasoning. Alright. The computer is not happy. There. Okay. Thank you, computer. Talk nice to it, or it can really fuck up your life, so you better be careful. So this is all there is. So on Leibniz's entire huge Wikipedia page, I mean, it just goes on and on and on. This is all the text they put for the great vis viva. Okay, the living force. So Leibniz's vis viva is mv squared. So again, just understand, mv squared was 100% wrong as a calculation. I mean, modern physicists admit it was 100% wrong. That's why they had to put a half in front of it. At least 100%. I mean, it could be many times more percents off. Twice the modern kinetic energy. So again, see, they call it something. They're calling it explicitly kinetic energy. In physics, kinetic energy is an object's... Oh, this is well written. In physics, the kinetic energy of an object is the energy that it possesses due to its motion. Now we know that's momentum, but whatever. It is defined as the work needed to accelerate a body to a given mass from rest, a body of a given mass from rest to its stated velocity. So again, that would even be okay. But that's not what the formula is really saying. It's saying it takes, again, the velocity is squared. So they're saying it takes 4 times the force to move it. Anyway, the rest of that goes on to say that having gained that energy during acceleration, now it has this real capacity to create wattage, and it doesn't. And they're using a roller coaster as an example, which is just kind of funny, because there is no 4 times event taking place on the roller coaster. You can find that out. There's no 4 times the energy that will be shown there. You won't see it. All right, anyway. He realized that the total energy would be conserved. I mean, everybody knew this already. So, but, let's not just pretend they were totally ignorant at that time. They'd already started figuring out this cycle thing. And that there was always someplace stuff was leaking out. in certain mechanical systems, so he considered it an innate motive characteristic of matter, whatever that could possibly mean. It's some sort of innate thing. You have it even when you're not moving. Apparently, it's the living force, right? And even dead things have it. Here, too, his thinking gave rise to another regrettable nationalistic dispute. I mean, it's not really nationalistic. I mean, it is between personalities, but it is a fact, you know, coincidental fact, right? I mean, here's the subtle coincidental evidence. Newton minds his own business, never travels anywhere, never goes anywhere, never does anything. Leibniz travels everywhere and does travel to England and visits Newton. Okay? And then it's just a coincidence, though, that the only two people in the universe who know calculus, or invented it, just happen to be Newton and Leibniz. Now, would it really make sense that Newton stole calculus from Leibniz's library when, well, you know, Newton really didn't have access to his library or his papers, when clearly Newton's papers were the ones that were at risk, and clearly that's the accusation, that Leibniz looked on the table and saw what he was up to and just invented his own little version of it. Seems pretty plausible. I mean, I can't say. I'm just saying it seems less, if you were to bet on one of those scenarios, which one seems more likely? You know, that Newton seduced him to come over to his house so he could try to steal papers Leibniz didn't even have with him? I don't think so. Anyway, that wasn't a nationalistic dispute. It was a dispute over character, like who's a liar. You know, it was kind of a serious dispute. All right, his vis viva was seen as rivaling the conservation of momentum. It's not just rivaling it, it's spitting on it. It's overtly saying you can't have it both ways. It can't be mv equals E, and it can be, mv squared, 1/2 mv squared. They're both the right answer. You can't put these two statements on opposite sides of an equal sign and say everything's okay. That's ludicrous. All right. Championed by Newton. Newton didn't even need to champion it. It's so obvious. It has such strong integrity. Mass times velocity. It has such integrity. And all the experiments, like I said, Newton could show you it. He could show you it happening all over the place. He could just show you, here's something that weighs half as much, and look what happens. And he'll show you each time. It always works out. So why is this even disputable? Okay. And by Descartes in France. Hence, academics in those countries tended to neglect Leibniz's idea. So again, they're talking like it's neglected it. Oh, no, it's not that they didn't see any evidence for it. No, they neglected it. I mean, this is so biased. In reality, both energy and momentum are conserved. So this is a Wikipedia page. I'm going to go read a sentence right after this that says exactly the opposite, right? So it just says here, I mean, it's just so bad. In reality, both energy and momentum are conserved. Obviously, the physics girl's video says you don't have to conserve kinetic energy. The living force, no, don't worry about it. It doesn't have to be conserved. You can throw it away anywhere you want to. It doesn't do a damn thing. You'll never see it. Just floats away. Okay, so the two approaches are equally valid. I mean, how can they say something like this? It doesn't make any sense. They're both statements regarding energy, and they come up with completely different numbers. I mean, numbers that are dramatically different. Hundreds of % different. How can they write this rubbish? All right. So the other page says, it's just so bad. I mean, it really is. Observation of heat generation during the boring of cannons add more weight to the view that mechanical motion could be converted into heat. Then vis viva, now stated to be known as energy, after the term was first used by Thomas Young. So they're calling it energy, even though it's not anything real. You could never, ever generate it. You can never make it do anything. You can never get it out of a wheel turning. You could never get it out of a stream. You could never pull this energy out of any mechanism ever. It's just magical fake energy. All right. So where was the part where they said this? Oh, it's up here, I think. Members of the academic establishment, such as John Playfair, were quick to point out that kinetic energy is clearly not conserved. Okay, and then they say, this is obvious to a modern analysis. So they just said how it is conserved, and they just said how it's clearly not conserved. You see, it's so bad. This is such awful, terrible physics. And they teach this? They do, and the students fall for it? They read these 2 pages and say, sure, that's okay. Yeah, it's not conserved, but it certainly is conserved. No doubt about it. It's conserved, but it's not. Anyway, this is obvious to a modern analysis based on the second law of thermodynamics. But in the 18th and 19th centuries, the fate of the lost energy was still unknown. And again, it's not lost energy because it's not energy. It can't make heat. If you make heat, you lose momentum. If you make noise, you lose momentum. If you bend something, you lose momentum. If you run over a fucking ladybug, you lose momentum. All of those things have to come out of your momentum. You can't conserve the momentum and have extra kinetic energy. It's impossible. It's silly. I just can't believe I have to keep making videos about it. All right, well, anyway. Gradually, it came to be suspected that the heat inevitably generated by motion was another form of vis viva, which again doesn't make any sense. We know that if there's heat, it has to come from something. Something has to cause the heat. It has to take energy out of something. Something can't make heat without it using any energy. If we could have heat without any energy, I wouldn't be wearing all of these clothes. Fuck. I mean, it's just so bad. Okay, review the 2 competing theories and caloric theory. So they reviewed it but didn't say anything. Count Rumsfeld in 1798's observations of heat generation. Okay, I already read that part. But just totally used. This is just such a pile of mush. And they don't even explain, right? They say the half was largely the result of these 2 guys. There's nothing on their pages that say a damn thing about it. So they say they had something to do with sticking the half in there, but there's no references. So I can't tell you when they figured that part out. You know, that, oh, this equation is really silly, but it, let's make it less silly by putting a half in front of it. Maybe that'll fix it. Maybe. I mean, it was so fake and so phony that they didn't even know how far off it is. And then they talk about how they derived it from the work equations. Now, the work equations have to do with distance again, right? So this is kind of obvious that if you're going to give a bias to something based on, how, it's like if something, the irony is they'll count the work before something actually hits something. And they'll say it was working the whole time it was moving towards it, when it wasn't doing any work until it actually hits the object. So, that's another cheat that's in their work equations, is they say, well, it's 1 second. Well, the thing hit in a half a second. So they count the time before it even hit as part of the distance it did work over. So they're really saying how much paint that it spread, I don't even know how to say this, over an area. When nothing is doing that, when it's converting energy, when it's transferring energy from one thing to another, it's not doing any of that paint spreading thing. So it's just kind of horseshit, because they're turning it into how much energy per second or per distance of space. And if you do that, of course, heavy things or light things are going to end up having advantages. So that's just nonsense. But it's certainly not a description of total energy. The work function is like per hour or per second. It's not total energy. Total energy is defined by momentum. All right. Yeah, I think that's enough. I'll give up for today. So, maybe I can make 15 videos tomorrow. Holiday fun and whatnot. But, yeah, no, I'm really tired of it. So, yeah, I don't know what I'm going to do. But it's really, it's really discouraging because I really didn't think smart people were this dishonest. I mean, these people are so dishonest. They won't concede anything, no matter how stupid this gets. I mean, there could actually be a little SpongeBob in their equation, and they still wouldn't say, "Oh yeah, that shouldn't be there." I mean, it's that bad. They'll admit no failures. It's just amazing. They just preach their Bible. Alright. So, enough of a video. Call it a day. Endeavor to persevere. So, till the next time and such, so forth and whatnot.